Howdy, folks. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show on Spreaker.com. This is Doc Owen. Glad to have you. The title of tonight's show is Doc's America Minus 16. And if you are not familiar with where those titles are coming from, it is a countdown to the November elections. So it's an indication that we have 16 more weeks to pull it together and turn the country around, point it in the right direction. And by that, I don't mean the political right. I should say point it in the correct direction, and then everyone will understand. Doc's America is not about ignoring things that are positive that have happened over the past 40 or 50 years. It is about turning around things that are not positive. That's why the intro song by Madison Rising is so important, because it talks about America before the hyphens came. In other words, before there were Mexican Americans or Italian Americans or German Americans or any type of a dash in front of the word Americans. We were all the same. We were all rowing the boat in the same direction. That's what these show titles are about, is to give some background and some insight into that. I work very hard to only deal with issues that I feel cross party lines. In other words, issues that should be of interest, concern, and sometimes alarm to both progressives, liberals, conservatives, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, whatever your stripe. I try to focus on information, facts and figures and data that are indicative that the United States of America is on the wrong path and continuing down a path of decline rather than an increase in our stature in the world. So, having said that, if you are familiar with the show, you know that we are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show, DOCOWENSHOW. And part of that is there is an app called Doc Owen Show for both the iPhone platform as well as the Android platform. That gives you instant access to all of the podcasts. You can go back historically as time allows, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and catch up on where we're coming from and how we're building this momentum called Doc's America Minus 16. Next week will be minus 15, etc. So if you care to get a little background on where the show is coming from, that's the best way to do it, is to go find the podcasts, because they are all out there and available generally through most of the social media. We start every week's show with a leadership quote, at least one. This week, two of them that I got on a daily basis kind of caught my attention. The first of which is a quote from a person by the name of Gail Sheehy, who is a best-selling author and writes articles primarily on the passages or the phases of that go on in a woman's life. So, as you might be able to tell by the sound of my voice, I'm not intimately familiar with that, but I have been around enough women to know that things change, just like it does with the guys. The secret of a leader lies in the tests he has faced over the whole course of his life and the habit of action he develops in meeting those tests. There are several key words to that, not the least of which is the habit of actions. We train ourselves to react in certain ways to certain situations. The other one is a quote from David Oyedepo, who is one of his claims to fame is being the richest pastor in Nigeria, but he's the founder of a living faith church which has a worldwide following and also the author of many books. He says, every word you believe, you are empowered to become. So there are others that have said if you can think it and see it, it must inevitably come to pass. That was a friend of mine that went on to become a fairly well-known I don't know exactly what you'd call him, but he was a fellow that helped others build self-esteem. So, first thing I want to do, in addition to the social media, we had our first meetup group meeting in San Antonio last night. It is called Off the Clock with Doc. It was a resounding success, actually. We had several people show up. It's a great time. Highly encourage you. We're doing them once a month. So if you're not a member of Meetup, you might want to go out and join Meetup and get involved with Off the Clock with Doc. It's some good time for one-on-one conversations, Q&A, and spreading the word about issues that are important to you. I really want to know about them. One of the articles that came across was dead on to a conversation that we had last night with one of the couples that attended the meetup. They actually moved to Texas from Washington State. Washington State, if you're not familiar, is what I would call an incubator state. In other words, it's a state where the liberal Democrats, the progressives, have completely taken over, and they use it to test a lot of policies, procedures, ordinances, yada, 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 and see how they're gonna play and see how they can get things done with a pen and a phone. And so they, wisely enough or just out of sheer frustration, moved themselves to Texas, which we're glad to have them. But one of the things that came across, you know how I am about EPA Gate, and the EPA was the one that was responsible for the Bundy Ranch situation not too long ago, and I'm certain it's not over, but it's quieted down for a little while. But the EPA has been, they have floated a new rule that extends their power and gives them the wherewithal to garnish bank accounts of those they deem to have violated their regulations. Now, they can do this unilaterally. In other words, if they deem that you violated their regulations, they can garnish your account. There's no going to court about it. There's no civil procedure that you can go through. They have said that they will set up an internal review board, and in that case, you will be guilty and must prove yourself innocent to get out of this wage garnishment environment. They announced that they were going to do this in the Federal Register. It says that to garnish non-federal wages to collect delinquent non-tax debts owed the United States without first obtaining a court order. That's what they said they are going to do. And just so you can follow what this means to the government, in 2009, the EPA raked in $96 million in fines. All right? By 2012, they had taken in $252 million in 2012. That's a 160% increase in their revenue from fines alone from citizens who basically have no recourse. So, besides what they're doing to the electric utility industry and your electric rates at home, they're coming after citizens on all fronts. They are, as far as I'm concerned, they are to be as feared as the IRS, if not more so. Benghazi Gate. I know that my millennial age listeners are somewhat tired of hearing about it, and even folks that aren't in that age group but are on the other side are very anxious for one side to move on. But unfortunately, the truth has yet to be told. And until it is told, then folks like myself have a responsibility to try to bring it to the front. And here is something that is very interesting and pretty well founded. in that basically there was a plot to kidnap Ambassador Christopher Stevens on 9/11. But it seems that the NSA had a listening site within the CIA annex in Benghazi that no one was aware of, and they picked up on the jihadist chatter and reported that out. And at the same time, the jihadis had a spy within the CIA building who found out that we had found out. So they created this giant ruse, if you will, that made it look like the plot had been foiled and the United States would drop their guard because the plot to kidnap Ambassador Stevens had gone away. Well, as we now know, in fact, it had not. So when it reared its ugly head again and it was found out that the U.S. had been tricked, was when the orders came out to stand down and wait and see what happened. And then eventually we lost 4 Americans. And we started hearing the story about this YouTube video. To let you know what the other side is like, there's a young man by the name of Ibrahim al-Asiri, he is literally classified by U.S. officials as an evil genius. He's like 25 or 26 years old from a fairly well-to-do middle-class family in Saudi Arabia. He has become a jihadi. He has gone over completely to the other side, and he has invented a bomb that is inserted into the bomber's body, and it's completely undetectable. It has no metal parts. And they found some of these bombs. That was the Hewlett-Packard printer debacle that went on. But also, he demonstrated one of these on his younger brother in trying to blow up a Saudi prince, where the younger brother got in to see the prince, detonated the bomb, and unfortunately it was directed the wrong direction, and it blew the younger brother up but did very little damage to the prince. They just don't think like we think. They have absolutely no regard for human life. That was the point of that story. The next one is about a blackout that went on in Yemen. If you're not familiar, ISIS, that is in the news a lot lately, is nothing more than it's actually a splinter group of Al-Qaeda, which we are told and have been told Al-Qaeda is on the run, and we've got them completely backed into a corner. I think that narrative has pretty much been blown out of the water. But Al-Qaeda recently attacked their electric power grid in Yemen and took it down. An awful lot of the thought process is they attacked Yemen as a trial run, and they attacked Yemen because they are fighting side by side with the Americans to get a handle on terrorism, so they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They did it. They plunged 25 million citizens into darkness. Now, granted, the Yemeni electric grid is probably not nearly as well protected as the one in the United States. However, here's something that should really bother you. April the 16th of this year, a substation in San Jose, California, was attacked by unknown gunmen. The substation was destroyed by a few men with rifles. Officials from the power company see this as a rehearsal in preparation for future attacks. If there are 55,000 substations in the United States, if only 9 of those were taken out at the same time, the cascading effects would collapse the entire U.S. power grid. So all they have to do is to know the right 9, time their attack to take them out at the same time, and the entire grid can collapse. And if the grid collapses, it could be out for 12 to 18 months on a nationwide basis. Tie that to the situation on the southern border. The recent influx of illegal aliens crossing the southern border is providing camouflage to both drug traffickers and terrorists. There are 300 terrorists known to have succeeded in crossing from Somali al-Qaeda group into the United States. The Department of Homeland Security has lost track of these 300. So we now know that we've got 300 al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States for sure, and we have no idea where they are. We'll definitely deal with the immigration issue in a little bit. We're a little bit past our first break. I'm ready for a sip of water. Take a listen to my friends at Madison Rising, and we will be right back.
Rally to you, come on, let's go. You've been asleep for way too long. The time has come to break the chains that bind our freedom. 9 to 5, you think you've done all that's needed. Judging by your paycheck, do you think you've succeeded? There's more to life than work without meaning.
Welcome back, folks. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show on Spreaker.com. This is Doc Owen. Glad to have you. There's one uplifting story that I ran into. It was published by the New York Times that says that liberal teenagers may turn into a generation of conservatives. So there might be a glimmer of hope out there. The comparison was made to the teenagers of the 1960s who protested against Vietnam and voted strongly Democrat, but less than a generation later, they came out overwhelmingly in support of Ronald Reagan. So somewhere along the line, they, of which I was probably one, I am certainly in that generation, although I was not amongst the Vietnam protesters. I also was not among the folks that voted Democrat. But I was a supporter of John F. Kennedy, who was a Democrat. It just didn't, in today's world, he certainly didn't sound like one. He sounded a lot more like a Republican or a conservative, shall we say. But the main thing is that things can change, and the youngsters have a tendency to equate what's going on with who is currently in office. In other words, the tune of "it was Bush's fault" or "it was my predecessor's fault" doesn't play very well with a young person that only sees the world and equates it to who is in office at the time, which is somewhat the way it should be, certainly after a certain period of time. If you follow my Twitter feed or my Facebook page, you'll know I had a post out not too long ago that had to do with, I think the exact quote was, to vote with your heart and your head, not your habit. And I continue to expand on that. And a day or two later, I happened to see, I think it was in the leadership organization that I follow, Crowned Grace International, their leadership quote of the day was from Eleanor Roosevelt. And Eleanor Roosevelt made the statement that to handle yourself, use your head. To handle others, use your heart. So we were somewhat singing off of the same page. I found an interesting article that I thought I would share with you. It says that voting for presidents according to race, sex, or heritage is bad citizenship. It falls right into line with what I have been thinking and trying to put out there, and certainly what the show tries to do is to give you the information to make an intelligent decision and not vote according to a habit or the way we've always done it. I'm going to get a little deeper into that conversation in just a second as a result of an email I got from a friend of mine. But the main thing is you have to think about what you're doing. You can't go on sound bites. You have to Do the research. You know how to do the research. All the tools are there. You may think it is monotonous and boring, so if that's the case, lean on some friends that are doing the research. But you can find the data. This article says that one of the most important decisions in the average American citizen ever makes is who to vote for in presidential races. In his book, George Stephanopoulos talked about Greeks will vote for a Greek over and above party affiliation. That was why they turned out for Michael Dukakis as a Democrat when they normally vote Republican. And I thought I'd ask a few interesting questions that I'll share with you very quickly. How many Americans voted for Barack Obama primarily because he is black, and they thought it would be a good idea to finally have a black president? Or correspondingly, how many voted against him because he is black? How many people are now lining up to vote for Hillary Clinton even before she announces her candidacy because they like the idea of America having its first woman president? And correspondingly, how many will vote against her on the same basis of her sex? How many Americans will vote for candidates on the basis of national or cultural heritage, as George Stephanopoulos claimed his fellow Greeks do? The answer to all of those questions is a lot of people vote that way. It literally, the title of the article is correct. It literally is bad citizenship. So no matter how important it is to be a diverse country, such as ours, to have had a black president, it is even more important for America to have an effective president. Voting on the base of race is racial bias, period. Either way, for or against. You're a racist if that's what you based your decision on. And there's not much getting around that. So no matter how you look at it, if you don't vote on the merits of the individual, then you've not really exercised good citizenship, which we are all chartered with doing. Very quickly, before I get into I'm gonna lead into the next little break with some background information that I know is out there in my podcast because I covered it I remember covering it when I first went from AM radio to this digital format. And it has to do with, basically it has to do with the parties, the political parties, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, and if you care to classify it that way, Tea Party. I explained the fact that the Tea Party is not a political party. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even have any members. The Tea Party has become the label for a conservative faction of the Republican Party, when in fact the Republican Party is supposedly rooted in the ideals that the Tea Party brings to the front. And that is the fact that we are a republic. We are not a democracy. We were founded as a republic. I will continue to go over that. It is a significant difference. And it has to do with things being based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the equality of all men, all sorts of lofty things that our founders put together. And they put them together for specific reasons. That was so we could create the America that became as great as it did. Speaking of that, if you've not seen the Dinesh D'Souza movie, America, you need to go see that. I haven't read the book, but I have seen the movie. It is excellent and should be viewed by both sides of the aisle. I doubt that it will be, just because, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, based on personal experience, the other side of the aisle is far less tolerant than the conservative side of the aisle. Far less tolerant. It's amazing. It's very unfortunate, but that's the case. But everybody should go see the movie America. It will open your mind up. It's a very good thing to see, particularly at this point in our history. So, I mean, it's not done without some theatrics in it. And stay until the very end, because you'll get to hear Madison Rising do the Star Spangled Banner, and so that's another reason to go. But it's a good movie. The point is that it's also the gist of the show. The idea of getting back to the Pledge of Allegiance, getting back to a knowledge of the Constitution, not what we think it should be, not what we've been told it should be, not the way it has been misconstrued by the media and slowly but surely kind of nibbled away at. And people have a tendency not to question things until they get really, really bad, which sometimes is too late because the damage has been done. We can have an entire generation of youth that their heads are filled with mush because they simply weren't challenged or weren't given the truth as they were growing up. And by the time they get to a point where it's important for them to know how to do things and to make the right decision and know the difference between right and wrong, they don't have a foundation to do that with. It's never been introduced to them. It's amazing. It's scary, and it's extremely unfortunate. It's very unfortunate for the country if we allow it to continue. There's no excuse for allowing it to continue. So I'm going to take another quick break here. I'll give you another dose of Madison Rising, and then we will come right back and talk about the invasion that's going on the south side of Texas. This is Madison Rising. I wanted you to hear some of their music. It is absolutely fabulous, inspiring, and a wonderful group. Got a 29-second limit, not imposed by them, but iHeartRadio. So I had to cut that one a little bit short. But when I pick up here in just a second, you'll be able to hear another 29 seconds, and then I'm going to encourage you to do something. So here they go again. Madison Rising. Pay attention.
Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets.
If you haven't figured this out, I'm a big fan of Madison Rising. What I'm going to encourage you to do is to go out to their website, madisonrising.com, or go to iTunes and download their albums. They've got 2 of them out there. They are both excellent. Their tagline is music with meaning, and it is very, very encouraging music. I highly recommend supporting their activities. They are not on a major label. They pay for everything they do on their own. Let's dive into the Texas border, which is at the top of the news and very close to home, so I think it deserves an entire segment. I got an email from a friend of mine, and you need to understand that I don't just associate with conservatives. I do associate with a lot of different people. That's part of it. That's part of being an unhyphenated American. and part of having differences of opinion and different solutions, even if you recognize that we have the same problem. And the reason I'm laughing is because this particular email started out with the phrase I'm going to give you. I think you will see the difference, how far apart we are in how we view what's going on in the Texas border. I do refer to it as an invasion. I'm going to give you some facts, figures, numbers, and information that I think will support my case. But this particular email started out with the phrase, I am following this child influx issue. I had to laugh when I got it, and I continue to laugh at the. And this is coming from somebody that really does know better. So, but I just thought I would point that out so that you'll know how things can gradually change if you soften or change the words that are used to describe a particular situation. A child influx issue would be if somebody dropped 2 or 3 children off at your house and asked you to take care of them for the weekend. We've got tens of thousands of children coming across asking to be taken care of for a lifetime. There's a tad bit of difference. So, if you want to know who's handling all this and who's taking care of this and where these little buses are coming from and how all of this is being managed and coordinated, who's behind the logistics of this influx, there is a group called the Southwest Key Programs. All right? They are the acorn of immigration. All right? And we've all seen the exposure of Acorn, but it's exactly the same model. They are completely run by La Raza. And if you're not familiar with La Raza, please make yourself familiar with it. La Raza is Hispanic for the race. They're convinced that we're occupying their territory. They're not about to give that attitude up. But it is the Southwest Key Programs is a very well-oiled machine set up to educate and reintegrate youth into American society. They also provide training for jobs. They are funded by government and state programs, and not just slightly funded. They were founded in 1987. Their headquarters is in Austin, Texas. Their fiscal year 2013 and 14 budget was $150 million, with funding from grants and contracts by U.S. federal, state, and local governments. Their specialty is in reunifying illegal minors with their families. They are the Underground Railroad for the American invasion from the South. So there was a ready-built organization to call upon to help with the folks that are coming through Mexico. And as if I needed to tell you this, a border agent, a spokesperson, they've all been clamped down on and told not to say anything, as well as anybody trying to visit these detention centers. There's no cameras, there's no tape recorders, there's no nothing allowed of reporters or anybody else that goes in there. So it's all being done in very, very high secrecy. But the spokesman, some guy from the Border Patrol, finally did speak up and talk about what an untenable situation it was, that they were being completely overrun. And the problem is that the Border Patrol agents are being brought in to deal with this invasion, and so the drug traffickers and the terrorists, they're just walking through stations that would normally be manned. I think it probably made the national news that, I don't watch it, but that President Obama was in Texas doing some fundraising. After much ballyhooing, he agreed to meet with Governor Rick Perry on the issue on the border. And actually, I'll just tell you what Obama said. That said he was open to suggestions from Perry and others that he dispatch National Guard troops to the border, but warned such a solution would only work temporarily. The problem here is not major disagreement, Obama said in Dallas. If they're interested, I stopped right there when I was reading it. I'll stop when I'm reading it to you. If they are interested, who is they? Why does he refer to anyone in this conversation as they? The phrase should say, if we are interested. That's what I'm talking about, hyphenated Americans. I am not a they to him. I refuse. And so should everyone else. If they're interested in solving the problem, then this can be solved. If the preference is for politics, then it won't be solved. Everything he does cues up a fight. The way he says things cues up a fight and allows him to distance himself that it wasn't him that did it. It's amazing. I mean, that right there just jumped all over me when I read that word. At the same time, on Capitol Hill, Republican opposition was hardening to his $3.7 billion request to do something about the border. Not provide a solution. All he did was ask for money. Not tell us how it was going to be spent. All he did was ask for money. Sorry, get a little fired up about that. They. Who does he think he is? There's another article, I'm going to flip by it real quick, that just says that the Congress is going to take a very slow, hard look at the $3.7 billion. Now I'm going to tell you something. I got two more things to throw out there that I'm going to tell you. This is the title of the article is An Act of War on America. On Monday, Mexico and Guatemala signed an agreement to fast-track the invasion of the United States. Literally. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and Guatemalan President Otto Perez Molina announced their agreement to jointly cooperate in and facilitate the invasion of their northern neighbor, the United States. It is labeled the Southern Border Program to Improve Passage. It's an officially sanctioned, coordinated effort on the part of Mexico and the nations of Central America to invade the United States. The agreement provides a network of border checkpoints through which an internal Mexican travel document will be issued, which is valid for a period of 72 hours. That document, known as a Regional Visitor's Card, will provide temporary legal status to those in Mexico illegally for the sole purpose of invading the United States. In other words, remember me questioning a couple of weeks ago when all this started, how they were getting across Mexico, that's holding one of our Marines in prison and won't let him go, that is absolutely death on any illegal being in their country. They're issuing the people of Central America a 72-hour visa, a 72-hour authorization to be funneled through Mexico to come to our southern border. Provide special protection as well as financial assistance to unaccompanied minors. I think that answered my question. So as I continued to dig into what we'll call immigration reform, because it has long been a hot button for me, it's now been brought to the forefront. It's something that I feel strongly about. I grew up in Texas. I've been here all my life. I have a lot of respect, used to have more respect, for our neighbors to the south in Mexico. I've always had a lot of respect for the people in Texas and the United States with South American heritage. They bring a lot to the party. We are all one. We've never questioned, prior to the last few years, we've never questioned their allegiance to the United States, the ones that are here. I found an article that says the birthright of citizenship is flatly unconstitutional. The current policy that any child who is born here, even to an illegal alien, is automatically a citizen of the United States. They're in the slang, they are called anchor babies. It's when a mother or both parents come over here to have their baby, and it's like throwing out an anchor that now they have at least one member of the family that is a United States citizen. According to the Constitution, that is absolutely not the case. The clause that issues is the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. That is unambiguous. The challenge that we've not focused on is that the parents of these anchor babies are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Therefore, their child is not a United States citizen. I think we're going to start hearing more and more about this particular constitutional challenge. It has been left off of the radar, I'm sure, for political reasons by both sides, because it is a hot potato. But the current influx and overflow is going to bring it to the front and allow us to ignore it no longer. It's very, very clear. They, according to the 14th Amendment, which has not been overwritten, they are not United States citizens. I want to close up with what I led into a little bit earlier about the parties, the Tea Party, the Libertarian Party. I had a Libertarian nominee, if you will, running for Bexar County Commissioner Precinct Number 2 in San Antonio in the coming November election. I'm not exactly sure when, because I was too young, it started to be so acrimonious and so antagonistic and so far apart that the two ideals have become. But we simply must figure out common ground upon which to meet and ignore all the other issues and take these common ground issues and fix them, such as that. And I know that, for instance, in my conversation about the child influx issue, as it was referred to, we were talking about. It was suggested that Texas man up. It was suggested that Texas become a big boy state and take care of our own issues and quit complaining. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. It's a federal responsibility. It is itemized that it is the federal government's responsibility to protect the borders. When Arizona tried to protect their own borders, the Department of Justice came down on them, sued them, and won, and forced Arizona to back off. I can assure you that Texas both the Texas militia, the governor of Texas, and the people of Texas would like nothing more than to be able to secure our own border. But we are told to stand down. We are told not to help. I have friends here in San Antonio that tried to put together a humanitarian visit in the very early stages of this to go provide water and supplies. And we were told, no, stay away. We got it. Give me a break, folks. This is going to take all of us to pull this off. And it's not what it appears to be. It is an invasion. It is an orchestrated invasion. And I don't care how old they are. It's like water rushing through a pipe. The first one that comes in, all the water comes in. Well, what was in the water? You don't know because there was too much of it coming through the pipe. You don't know until it gets out on the other side and spreads out into a nice thin lake, and you can see all the rubbish that was inside the water. And that's exactly what's going on. It's going to spread out across the United States, and we're going to go, holy camole, where did this come from? Well, it came from Texas back in July, remember? Come on. It needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved quickly. Humanitarian aside, it needs to be resolved, cut off, done. Getting too wound up. I want you to listen to this one final quote from a fellow by the name of Reagan. Hold on.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the only true revolution that has ever taken place in man's history. Every other revolution simply exchanged one set of rulers for another set of rulers. But only here did that little band of men so advance beyond their time that the world has never seen their like since evolve the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I, for one, do not intend to have that conversation with my daughter or granddaughter or great-grandson, for that matter. It ain't going to happen. That's why we need to close the border. As you listen to this final song, remember to replace the word rock with the word doc. I'll be back to say goodnight.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on. Join me home. We'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. We're going to rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're going to rock around the clock tonight.
This is Doc Owen. You've been listening to the Doc Owen Show on Spreaker.com. Glad to have you. Come back next week. Take care. Pay attention. God bless. Good night.